So for this talk, Martin came up with a clickbaity title for me, which I stuck with. And my goal today is that, I mean, some of these things some people will know because I wanted to strike a balance of being useful and not just dump arcane shit on you. But if somebody actually knew all of them, then I have to come up with some exclusive reward. So please don't. The first one is still fairly straightforward, but it comes up from time to time on the Discord server that you can actually generate set and show rules in a loop. So I've taken an unusual example with a set rule. You typically see this with like text replacements, where it's actually a bad option because it generates multiple rules and you would better use a regex. But here you can see I've created a list with the 4 basic shapes and types, which here are slow. And I iterate over that list, and with fold, it's quite convenient to write. You can basically take the initial content you get in your show rule and pipe it through this function 4 times, each time generating a set rule. So you can actually put behind set a variable that you assign yourself. It doesn't have to be just heading. It can be anything that was assigned heading. And this way I can write show rules that simulate that Typst has some kind of weird inheritance feature for shapes and get the strokes on all of those. So this is pretty nifty sometimes. But as I said, if it's for text, please use a regex instead. Okay, so this was easy, right? I bet fairly many people of you would have come up with that given some time. So let's continue with something a little more arcane. Breaking, but not right away. So if you look at that code, and at least if you're a bit familiar with programming, you might think that this break statement will just yeet out of that for loop and not do anything weird with text and upper in the 5th iteration. But it's not actually true. If you look at the output, you can see the text is blue with a 5, and it is uppercase. So why is it in that weird way? And you can see it maybe a bit better if I rewrite this code to use a set and a show rule. Now you see, obviously the text is blue because I wrote set text blue. Why would break affect that? But set text blue is really not much more than the function call is, and the same with show upper. So this is the reason types break and continue and return semantics are a bit weird, that it basically still keeps on going with evaluating function calls and everything, but breaks out of code and content blocks. So still not too arcane. Here's something that maybe some of you people don't know, even though they are quite involved with the scripting part, and it's about text. And it has less to do with types and, oh, this is the 4th thing. All right, so this is actually a nice one because this is an easy one for me because it shipped in 0.12 and there's no documentation for it. But it's quite useful. So imagine you have a header and a footer, and you want some page numbering on it, but you also want to reset your counters. So let's say on the 2nd page, I want to reconfigure my counter, and that would be counter page.update4. But as you see, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? And the reason is that Typst considers for the order of counters the header first, then the page body, and then the footer. And this counter update is right in front of world, so it is after the 2. That is inconvenient, but you only notice this once you use the header, because in the footer it's correct, it's after it. This is a problem. So what we shipped in 0.12 is that you can actually just abuse the weak page break feature and sort of snuggle your counter update in between the page break and the weak page break, and it just works. So I think that's a pretty nice API design, right? And it works for the header and the footer. It is very nice, I think. All right, so I guess less people knew that than the previous ones. All right, so the 4th one I already announced a bit, so it's more about Unicode than Typst, but of course we strive to support standards at Typst, especially Martin here. So obviously we adhere to the Unicode line breaking algorithm, and there's some nifty things you can do with it, breaking lines like you want. Let's start with a simple one. I guess many of you will know this, maybe even from LaTeX already. If you want to have the name of your favorite action hero in one line and not separated like this, you can use the tilde character to force it to stay together with a non-breaking space. But there are a bunch more of those fun Unicode code points. So you can have in the non-breaking department also a non-breaking hyphen. Let's say you don't want X-ray to break, then just replace the hyphen with sim.hyph.nobreak. It's very convenient to write, obviously, right? So I would always do that. So there's a different way where you just write like show X-ray and then box, which I think more people will do. I must admit I'm still not really sure which one is better. I need to think some more about this. I had some discussion with this in a second. Some discussion about this with a maintainer of Harfbus, the text shaping library we had, and he somehow said that in a typesetting system you shouldn't use these code points, but I don't really know why yet. So I will need to figure that out. What was the question?
The comment is that a lot of people don't know you can write it like that with the semicolon.
With the semicolon, yeah, that needs to be documented better. That's true. There are various different ways to write that. You can use the semicolon. You can use round parentheses here and here, or other. You can also use curly braces. But yeah, this is a struggle. But that's still fairly straightforward. The non-breaking hyphen. There are more nice things. You can use in the non-breaking department again the word joiner. So let's say you have the question, and at a question mark you can obviously line break, because that is how English typically works. But maybe it's meme case and it has to be that way, and then you can just put a nice little word joiner in there. So that's very useful. This was actually the one where the Half-Bus maintainer said I shouldn't use it. And in the opposite department, basically, we have what if I want to allow breaks? What if I have the alphabet and I want to allow a break? Maybe even with hyphenation. Then you can insert the shy hyphen, which will only appear if it needs to appear at that point if the line is actually broken. But if the page is wide enough, then there will be no hyphen. And for example, you could also write a regex show rule that takes your words and replaces them with the correct shy hyphen combinations to basically have your own custom hyphenation dictionary. And the final one in the breaking department. So I sometimes use Enterprisify, which is a nice website to come up with names for your classes in Java. And whenever I have a reflective thread interceptor in my documentation, I have this problem that it doesn't look nice. You can also see it in the code, but in the output it's especially bad. So maybe you can just insert some nice zero width spaces. And because I don't want to do that with the semicolon here, so I wrote this weird join thing. But yes, zero width space, also very useful. There are some interesting hacks that used that in an early version of Typst that didn't properly line break links, where people would insert a zero width space at every individual letter of a link. But since then, we've come up with an individual fine-tuned for links algorithm out of the Typst forges, which just takes care of this automatically, and I have never heard about it since.
Yeah, I pulled this out of my ass. This is where it came from.
This was the right. Never mind. So, just a quick summary for you. We have in the breaking department, or in the non-breaking department, we have the non-breaking space, non-breaking hyphen, and word joiner. And in the breaking department, we have the soft hyphen and the zero width space. Okay, so this was number 4. I bet you're excited about number 5, which is about measuring. And this is one thing I thought about this on long walks for multiple weeks, and I couldn't come up with a solution. So I'm very delighted that in the end we were somehow able to figure this out. And the reason I had to implement this is because I wanted to ship an update to Typst that changed some stuff, basically enabled multi-threading, but it broke table X. And I didn't really feel comfortable with breaking table X, and especially citations in table cells. You would get this weird error message, failed to format citation, and this is a bug. But yeah, now it works like this. Let me walk you through the code. We have a state that starts out as 0. We have a context expression with a rectangle, and its width is basically just the value of the state, so we can see the value here in a nice way. And then we have a context block where we measure the width of that expression, and we also have some state updates, and we have the thing itself. So maybe what happens here is not so surprising if I change things up, but it should be surprising. So if I do it like this, width is 0 point. If I move it after the update, width is 10 point. If I move it once more, width is 20 point. But why? Measure doesn't really know anything about this it being here. There could be 2 its, there could be 0 its. Like, how does that work? And the reason is that Typst smartly basically detects, oh, this looks to be the same. You probably wanted to measure this, so let me just magically measure this one here. And if there are multiple, it just takes the first one. And we actually spoke about that because it was a slight breaking change, because measurement now uses the location in the document, basically takes the next thing in the document. So if you were in a position where you had no location active, but only styles, there are a few contexts that are only styles, not location, it wouldn't work. But yeah, this was a pretty crazy one. But it works. And it fixes citations in table X. All right. And now for the last one. Types functional pure, right? So, like, there shouldn't be any side effects, right? Yeah, maybe you are wrong about that. So let's take this example. We have some interesting functions called f and g. And f is called here, but we just discard the result. Like, there shouldn't be anything funky going on, right? No side effects. But if I comment out f, somehow I get different output. So how could that be? And the reason it lies in some interesting feature that maybe some of you know about, that makes it more convenient for you to write. Yeah, I should hold the microphone closer. And basically what it does is it catches errors in your show rules and contextual expressions in basically every non-final layout iteration. So the layout in Typst loops to resolve positions and let you use things like location.position and stuff. And because of this looping, you just say like query, heading, whatever, and then you get all the headings. But Typst has no clue about the headings initially. So it first compiles, then it knows about the headings, and then compiles again with knowledge of the headings. But often your code will not work in the initial iteration. If you do things like query heading dot first, then that will crash with the array is empty. I have no clue what you're talking about. In the initial iteration, but Typst catches it for you. And this can be abused to make functions sort of impure in this interesting way here. So just a quick explanation. Locate, for the people that don't know, expects exactly one match of the label high. If there are 0 matches or 2+ matches, locate will throw an error. So what we do here is we have an A with high, and we have a B with high up here in G. And now we go into this context block initially. And remember, in the initial iteration, Typst is absolutely clueless. It knows nothing about G argument. So there is no high. And F will just throw. So and this will obviously terminate the code here, so no G is running. And as a result, by the end of the first layer iteration, we just have A high, and this error thingy here is just replaced by empty content. And then in the next iteration, we know about this A. So again, we call F, locate high. Okay, that works out fine. It's exactly one match. And then we call G and say, okay, is the number of highs even? No, it's 1. So no extra high. So we stabilize at just one element. And if we go the other way around, with this commented out, we have 1 high. Initially, we still don't know about it. But we call G. G says, is it even? It's initially 0, so yes. So it generates a B. We have A and B. We call it again. Now it's even. It's still B, so it stabilizes at AB. So yeah, that's a little bit cursed, but I closed the bug report with, yeah, that's just unfortunate. Nothing I can do about it. So the alternative of somehow changing things up and not catching errors is just way worse. All right, so this is the final one. So every one of you can now think about how many you got right. And if there's one with 6, I'm very impressed. But I don't really think there will be. All right, thank you. Okay, there's time for one question. No questions. Everybody is filled with new knowledge now.
Yeah, it would be nice if we get those slides as well.
Yeah, sure. They will be uploaded.
Sure.
Bugs again, or bugs maybe hard.
I did not put it into the issue. The issue is not existing.